So if you're a veteran, imagine in the claims process, your C&P exam is tomorrow. Your stomach is in knots, your anxiety is built up, and you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So today in this video, I want to talk through a 10-minute confidence brief to reduce your anxiety, enhance your clarity, understand what you should be doing when you go to the C&P exam, understand what you should be doing after, and making sure everything goes as smooth as possible. Before we get into this topic, remember, if you don't know anything about the claims process, I have a 20% off code for my own course I've built start to finish for 7 hours of modules where you can learn every step of the process and make sure you're doing everything correctly. But for now, let's jump into the C&P exam and how to make you feel better, more comfortable as you're going into it. All right, let's knock this out first. What is a C&P exam, and really what isn't a C&P exam? Because from personal experience, if you've watched any of my other videos, I had a horrible first C&P exam, and I do not want anybody to experience the same thing I did. So your C&P exam is not treatment, and your C&P examiner does not decide your rating. This is a fact-gathering appointment typically made by a consultant group that works with the VA that helps the VA educators decide your VA rating when it goes up the chain. And this might be in person, this might be on a video call, and sometimes it could even be on a phone call. And if you miss this exam, there's a chance that they just deny some of your ratings because all they will go off of is your evidence. They do not get to talk to you, the person, in some format for you to tell your story and your side of what is happening. So I want you to think about the C&P exams this way. It is essentially like going to an insurance adjustment for an incident that has happened. If you have an incident at your house and your insurance owes you money, your insurance owes you time, you need to provide documentation. And guess what? Insurance places don't just pay out, they don't chase you down to give you money, right? It's a similar mindset going into these exams. There's nothing wrong with an individual C&P examiner. They're doing their job. You just have to understand what you're advocating for. This isn't treatment. This isn't a hospital visit. This is you telling these prior issues that you've had, this collection of evidence and your story for this person to write a report and a summary to give to the VA. Plain and simple, that's all it is. So let's start with that to help with the mindset so that you're not going in there like I did, stupidly just being like, oh, this is a health exam. This is where I can get some treatment. This is where I can express myself and talk about issues that are happening, which you do. You just got to do it in a very specific way. And now let's jump into this preparation. So hopefully you've saved this video or you've liked it or you've shared it, but you are 24 hours out from your exam and hopefully you've done some of these steps beforehand, but let's talk through every single step you should be doing in preparing for the C&P exam. Okay, so the first step is confirming all logistics. Check your letters, check your text, check your emails, check everything that you have to make sure you have the right time and place and date and building number. This isn't typically going to be at the VA hospital. All of my exams were at these little offices elsewhere within the city of Pittsburgh where I live. None of them were at the VA. And actually the first time I made the assumption that it was at the VA itself, and it wasn't. And I'm glad I checked as I'm putting in the directions to go. It wasn't at the hospital. So please do your due diligence the night before and just make sure you know exactly where you're going. And if this is a telehealth appointment, remember that you're also going to be getting on this call early, but do an audio test however you can. And if you can't get on the device early, get on 20 minutes early if you can, and just make sure that you have audio connection, you have a video connection, whatever you need, make sure that you have that set up before the exam. And remember, this is almost always a contracting company. So with logistics, understand who you're actually talking to. Are you seeing QTC? Are you seeing a VES? Are you seeing OptumServe? Or are you seeing Loyal Source? Those are pretty much the only ones I've heard of that actually have examination schedules, but just understand that you're going to one of these places. And this actually helps with some of the further steps, but know that this isn't the VA and somebody you've probably actually seen prior. And just remember, if you cannot make your exam, there are specific rules on when you need to reschedule, but within 5 days, you need to make sure this happens beforehand, because that will delay your claim. You only have one chance to reschedule. The VA is really stiff about this when they have an examination. Hopefully you've given them some ideas of when you can make an exam in the first place. But you get one chance to reschedule, and if not, your claim will go through and it could be denied, or you could have to start the process over. Please make sure you have your logistical shit together. All right, so number 2 is submitting your records the correct way. Do not show up at your exam handing them new records that are also not in their system. I advocate for saying you could bring a copy of your records if you would like to in person, but this is not your submission of records. I hope to God you've logged onto the website beforehand, but you submit your evidence and your claim through the VA's website when you're initiating this claim. However, if it's going through QTC, I've actually had the ability to jump in and see my appointment, and I can actually add evidence there. And a pro tip for you is I had all my evidence uploaded to the VA, which hopefully gets sent over to QTC before your appointment. But guess what? If it doesn't, you might not know. So when I went onto the QTC website, when I was able to get the login, I actually asked the guy that called me to schedule. I said, is there a way I can look at my chart at my login? He said, sure, absolutely. Here's how. He gave me some instructions, and I uploaded the same files onto QTC just to make sure that they were there before my exam. And I did this probably the week before my exam. I highly suggest you do that as well. And by the way, this is one of the many things I talk about within my course. So again, if you're starting this process, I have a course that has these steps for a reason. They do them in order so you're not lost in the sauce the night before. Hopefully watching this video, hopefully you've done this previously and you know what to expect going into the exam instead. But let's move on to the next one. Okay, so tip number 3 is build your functional snapshot. So when you're building this, I want you to build out notes for yourself, whether you have to bring them and have these notes on you, or you just memorize exactly the steps that you're having. You can't necessarily remember every part of the personal claim or the personal statements that you've written, but you should have bullet points on what you're going to say and how you're going to articulate these. Ratings are about functions that you have under ordinary life, not your perfect day, not your worst day, but your day-to-day life and how often these disabilities affect your day-to-day life on average. Understanding and tracking some of these makes a really big difference, but writing yourself some notes so you remember when things have happened on ordinary days and not on the worst days only, or only on the best days. I would highly suggest writing 3 to 5 bullets that cover physical, mental, emotional, and even anything extra that covers this for each disability for you to have in the back of your mind. And I would gear these towards the schedule of ratings that you fall under based on your disabilities. So for example, for my back rating, I wrote on the physical conditions. I said, when I sit for longer than 45 minutes during any given day, I start to feel nerve pain down my right leg. And then after 2 hours, it's down both of my legs. And then I have to stand up. It is interrupting my normal work life when I have to sit at work for 6 to 8 hours, and it sometimes interrupts the time where I drive long distances in a car and I have to pull over on the side of the road. My back becomes irritated every day at some capacity, sitting too much. And remember, they're looking on frequency and severity along with this, right? How frequent do these happen? How severe do these happen? And how does this affect your day? Those are really big keys to have. And remember, you have to verbalize this at the exam. It's nothing to be overly emotional about or overly cautious of. You just have to understand that you are talking through this as much as your evidence is also going to be there. You're backing that up. And with that, you need to provide your flare-up statements too. What actually does the worst day look like? So when somebody asks you, you had some back pain, right? Like, talk me through it. You're talking about the severity of the day-to-day normally, and you're talking about the consistencies of these things that are happening, how much they interrupt your day. But then also, you want to talk through the hardest day. You want to make sure that's actually added. And then I've added, like I said in my first example, talking about that my back was starting to hurt, but I also did use the term when my back pain has flared up from sitting too long and I'm getting uncomfortable and it's been weeks of this, it stresses me out. I have to get up and lay down because it hurts so damn bad. That is the worst of that experience that I've had, and it's been interrupting some of my work days that I've had in the past. Something like that to make sure that they do understand that this condition day to day is frustrating. That is your true rating, is probably the day-to-day rating. But the flare-ups are not to be ignored because some of those really apply to the 38 C.F.R. schedule of ratings for your disabilities. Having a flare-up for a migraine might be that prostrating motion of laying down, and you might not lay down every single day, but you might lay down once a week when it's severe because that's a flare-up tendency. That's very important to actually acknowledge. Okay, so number 4 is to list all of your medication that you have, all of the devices that you use, and all the prescriptions you have that cover anything. I would strongly recommend jotting down your current prescriptions that you have to include the names and the doses that you've been given and when this was prescribed. Talk through any devices that you've used in the past, current or past ones, why they haven't worked and what has possibly worked for you. And then also your treatment history within these, which again, if you've watched my course, this is written down in a very strong and well-written personal statement. But if you're talking through like a prescription, say I've been on this prescription for 5 years and I started taking it for this reason and I'm still taking X amount of dosage right now. Just make sure you have that ready to go along with your notes about the consistencies that you've had within your disability. Okay, so number 5 is who can be in the room with you and what can you do about this? You may discuss with the exam when you're booking this if you can have a caregiver or a family member with you. they can request them to not be in the room during the exam. That is possible to do. I would strongly encourage you that if you're setting up this exam appointment, make sure that you want to annotate the fact that you need a caregiver for this reason, because they do help you with the disabilities that you have, and make that clearly stated before you go to the exam, and have this expectation that, well, this person should be here. They've been to all my medical appointments, when again, this is not treated as a medical appointment. Just clear the room with that. Make sure that you have that ready before you go. Okay, and lastly, get a good night's sleep before this exam, which I know can be tough. I was really nervous for my second exam, seeing how bad the first one was, and I actually didn't get very good sleep. And it didn't really help my claim. It didn't really not help it. I just was feeling like I can't remember as much stuff that I wanted to say, and I was starting to get nervous about that. So do your best, have a really good, relaxing day as best as you can the night before, eat a good meal, and be ready for this exam feeling well rested, so you can feel like you can articulate well, use your memory to its fullest capacity, and look over your notes in the morning rather than at night and have it keep you up at night. However you want to do that part. Sometimes I like to look at notes at night or maybe write them down to get it off my mind, but do whatever you can to have that one really good night of sleep right before the exam. Okay, so you're showing up at the exam, and now you're probably wondering, how am I supposed to talk throughout this exam? What are the specifics? Because really, these exams go by pretty damn fast. You might not be prepared for how quickly they can go and cover a lot of your ailments that you might be claiming. So use functional and time-anchored statements. Think of things like the typical week, the typical day, and again, adding the flare-ups on the worst days. And make sure you're keeping these honest and concrete examples that are very focused on exactly the issues you have and not just rambling about everything. And so if you're talking about physical conditions, let's describe like your back pain and you're walking. Describe those limits with numbers, with time that it takes until your back hurts, with the amount of steps that you have throughout the day until you have to take a break, whatever that might look like. Give them actual frequency and numbers every time it happens on that consistent basis. And if you have pain and weakness physically, tell them how it reduces function. Make sure that, again, it's part of this consistency phase where you're saying it reduces function from something else. Pain stops me from doing X. Whatever X might look like for you in that specific area. It could be not just your back, it could be your arms, your shoulders, your legs, but pain stops emotion, and that happens during this amount of time, this frequency cadence. And again, this opens up the ability for them to say, well, when does it hurt the most? And that's when you have your flare-up statement, the thing that you summarize the most, where that's the worst day and that's the worst of this part. That does happen. And for mental health conditions, I'm going to make a very different video that summarizes all of it for C&P exams, but on the broad strokes, let's talk through a few bullet points for it as well. The VA rates occupational and social impairment. So you're matching some of the examples that we've talked about in such categories as missing work, conflict with other coworkers, and even sometimes isolation, the frequency of panic attacks, and also the frequency that you're not taking care of yourself that you can remember. And some of these questions may become standardized screeners that it says, in the past 2 months, have you ever felt this? Or in the past 6 months, describe how you felt. And that's an opportunity to really hammer in on the consistencies, the frequencies, and the amount that it happens, like holistically, beyond just saying, sometimes I felt sad. Instead of saying that, you would actually use specifics to say, sometimes at work, I felt so depressed, I don't want to speak to anybody. And then at home, I feel the same way, and I really don't want to leave my house. And that's hindered how I have a good time socially. And I don't have any control of feeling that way. And it happens every single week, no matter what. You want to get into some of those details. But again, we're going to talk through mental health in a different video coming out soon. And now lastly, with actually being at the exam, can you record it? And I would say that you can actually ask about recording it, but they have the right to say no. I did not actually think that I would have to do this at one point, and the first exam was so bad, I kind of wish I did do it, and I don't suggest either one. This is a personal preference on how much you feel comfortable being there. I felt comfortable articulating myself the second time after learning how bad the first one was. I didn't feel the need to have to record it. I did, however, have to actually go back during a higher level review and explain to somebody that gave me a phone call the reasons why I'm asking for a higher level review, because I made statements that were not clearly written down because my rating did not reflect that. And I actually did say that out loud. I said, this is what I had said, and I don't know if they wrote this down or not. And this actually helped me jump up my rating. So it could be beneficial to record it. This is on your discretion. This is not advice legally. And you also have to ask somebody if you're going to record. You can't just turn on your camera and record it and think that will hold up in any sort of VA courtroom in the future. Okay, so let's just talk about what happens after the exam, because you're not going to leave there with a current rating. I'll tell you that much right now. So after the exam, this provider writes a report and they give it to the VA. And if you want a copy of this report, you might not be able to get it right then and there. You can actually request a copy of how that exam went. So to get a copy, you have to read this off the screen, request it from the VA using VA form 20-10206. And that will give you the ability to have a copy of what had happened during that exam, which you might need to use later in case you're doing a higher level review or a supplemental claim. But remember, keep in mind, it's not just about this appointment. All the evidence you submitted prior will be looked at along with this appointment notes. This is the icing on the cake to do really well at the C&P exams. When you've done really well at personal statements and gathering evidence the right way, this all comes together into one, and then the VA makes a decision in a matter of weeks or months. It's not going to be immediate. So what happens if things go sideways? Because I think it's fair to say that things can go wrong. So let's talk through a couple items that you can use in your favor if things are not looking good during the exam for whatever reason. So if you felt like the exam was rushed or you missed key facts, this checklist will help you. The first thing you can do is obviously write notes during the exam. There's no reason you can't. And if you want to let them know, just say, well, I want to write notes to remember what you're going to be asking me, then I think that's fair to do. So write a note and keep some memory log of what they had asked you, and at least jot down some of the responses that you had as well. So the second part is to request that report. So again, you can do that online after the exam's done. You can't do it right then and there, but that's an obvious, easy way that if you don't want to write down your own notes for whatever reason, you can actually get the full exam and the report that was given to the VA. Request that online. That's probably your best step. So the third part is documenting concerns that you did have, which is a different form. It's actually going to be statement in support of claim, VA form 214138, or a lay witness personal statement form 21-10-2010 to correct factual errors or adding missing functional examples within your exam. So you can actually file and leave there if something wasn't going right. You can leave there and write a lay statement about the exam process, what had happened. And you need to do this if this does happen to you. I'm going to make this very clear that I had somebody actually physically push down on my back during the back review that I had the very first time, and I did not know that that was like a really big mistake on their parts. I'm not harping on every single person that is working in this claims process at that level as a contractor, but I had no idea that I should have really filed that immediately. So number 4, kind of like what I talked about, if there's inadequacies within your exam, I would submit a higher level review in the post-exam process if you feel like you provided them everything accurately and correctly. What happened with me, just to give a very brief context, I submitted a higher level review because I thought that examiner didn't write some stuff down. And I actually really believe that because my rating came back in a different rating category than what the actual evidence had for me with my diagnosis. And somebody just gave me a phone call and I got to describe this. So if you do the higher level review, it doesn't mean they'll put you through an entire exam. Somebody might just call you and say, hey, what's really going on? What really happened? And they might just want to have a conversation about it. And that's your opportunity to be very concise, to be very clear, not give that person attitude, it's not their fault, and just make sure that you're fighting for yourself the right way. And so to recap and wrap this up, remember to do these steps in a brief before you get to your C&P exam. I hope you find this video early in this process. You're not watching it the night before the exam as you Google and keyword search how to successfully have a C&P exam. I really hope you find this video. And also, if you found this video helpful, subscribe to my channel because I'm putting out videos at least once a week, if not twice a week if I have time. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this. If you want to watch the next video, watch it up here.